Thank you all for coming out. We have this is the Monitor Candidate Forum night, so I appreciate everyone's attendance here. Steve Leone, editor of the Monitor. I'm going to be moderating tonight, and I'm going to be alongside Monitor editorial board member Laura Kiernan. Right here. So I got a bunch of people to thank. Just kind of want to go through a couple things first. Terry Forson and Jack Dunn and the rest of the staff at Concord High really helped kind of pull this together. They did a lot of work setting up, so big thank you to them, as well as ConcordTV, which came from downstairs up here, and they're right back there. You're going to be able to see this on ConcordTV. We're also going to be putting it on our website. You'll be able to get it on social media, so you'll be able to see this in the days to come. So thank them for coming. And all the candidates here. You know, we asked kind of in short order, so we appreciate kind of everyone kind of sticking with it and coming through on all our requests, and certainly appreciate that. And thank everyone, you know, for coming and participating in this. That's hugely helpful. Okay, so now we have the ground rules. You know, so we have 3 forums tonight. We're going to start with the mayor and the at-large candidates. Unfortunately, this is the forum that probably has the fewest amount of people. We have 3 people who just could not make it tonight. The other ones ought to be kind of full packed houses. So the forums are going to run about 50 minutes. We're going to have a 10-minute break in between each of the forums. That'll give you time to go out. Again, we have a question box out in the back. Feel free to pose a question, and we'll do our best to get to it. So Laura and myself, we're going to ask some questions first, and then we'll probably have 2 questions, then we'll turn it over to the audience questions, which we'll be doing the asking. Candidates will have an opening and closing statement, so they'll have like a 30-second statement to introduce themselves. You know, so big piece of this is timing is critical because we're trying to get through a lot of questions. So, you know, we're asking the candidates to stick within the time limit. Dana Wormold, opinion editor here, he has his soccer cards. He has a yellow card that he's going to hold up when you have 30 seconds to go, and then when you have no time left, when you're over your allotted time, you get the red card. So wrap it up before we have to pull out the hook. And you know, one last point on that is this is a forum, not a debate, so we're not keeping open rebuttal time specifically on individual points, but you do have the closing statements that you can use any way you'd like. So try to keep the rebuttals. We're not going to go back and forth on individual points. So with that, I think we're ready to get started. So we're going to just introduce the candidates here. We got Jim Belay, Concord Mayor, Roy Schweikert, also running for mayor, and then an at-large candidate is Fred Keach. We put these seats together because these are people that everyone in the city is going to be voting for. So with that, I think we're just going to ask the candidates, starting from Mayor Boulay on down, to just give your 30-second opening statement, and I'm going to give you your microphone back.
I can usually project, but not without a gavel, I don't feel comfortable. So, well, first of all, good evening, and thank you all for attending. I really appreciate it. It's great to see everyone here tonight. I want to also say thank you to the Concord Monitor for Concord High School and to ConcordTV for taping this evening. I think in giving us this opportunity to participate is a real positive thing. I'd also like to say thank you to the citizens of Concord for giving me the privilege of serving as a Ward 10 councilor for 10 years and as mayor of this great city for the past 10 years. Tonight, I welcome the opportunity to discuss my record, I believe a proven record of accomplishment, and how I believe this city is truly on the move, and I'm on the move for continued success. So I look forward to answering your questions and sharing our visions for the future of Concord.
Mr. Schweikert?
Hello, I'm Roy Schweikert, and I'm running for mayor because I think the current city government devotes far much time and money to a few blocks of Main Street that are less than 3% of the city's valuation. They have like a Ponzi scheme whereby each development raises the tax rate, but it's supposed to lower it sometime in the future. Well, it hasn't yet, and the next one isn't going to be any better. If I'm elected, I'll appoint a neighborhood streets committee to look around and pay attention to neighborhoods, all parts of the city. I'll end the downtown Ponzi scheme, close out the TIF districts so everybody pays their fair share toward police, fire, and education. And here we are. Concord is more than Main Street.
Thank you. Mr. Keach?
Thank you. And thank you folks for hosting this event. It's a very important part of the process. I'm mostly a lifelong resident of Concord. Grew up here, left for Durham for a time, and then Portland, Maine, but came back to a community that I really love. And I've seen Concord change over the years, and I've seen it evolve, and I think evolve in a good direction. And my sort of vision is to think kind of long-term and figure out policy, vision, and employ a good management staff, which I think we currently have, to kind of execute that. Main Street investment, I think, is not just Main Street investment, but any commercial investment, I think, is the single most important thing we can do as a community to minimize the impact to residential taxes. Because if we can increase our tax base on the commercial side, you all as homeowners are going to benefit in the end. So it's a key part of what is going to make Concord great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Before we get started, we wanted to say that Amanda Grady-Sexton and Dan St. Hilaire sent their regrets. They had other obligations and couldn't be here tonight. So let me ask the first question and say again, thanks to everybody for coming. And we give each candidate 2 minutes to answer, and we're going to go from left to right and then from right to left to try to be as fair as possible. So, Mr. Boulay, we wanted to ask everybody, what do you see today as Concord's top priority, the city's top priority, and how would you address it?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you. It is, without a doubt, in my opinion, that there are plenty of issues facing the city of Concord, but by far, in my opinion, it is growing the tax base. When Councilor Keach actually touched upon it in his opening remarks, when we're able to grow the tax base, we take pressure off everyone throughout the community to control their taxes. But how do we do that? Well, first of all, one of the things I think that this council and over the past 10 years as mayor, we have, I like to joke and say that when I became mayor, the economy tanked. But what we did was we stayed the course, and we continued to invest in our infrastructure. We continued to invest in our community. And while we did that, we were able to achieve a AA plus bond rating. We were able to receive awards from distinguished awards of how we budget. But by doing that investment into our infrastructure, it allowed us to do things like Main Street. And I think that everyone I've spoken to, for the most part, has said that that project has been transformative. And from that project, we now see new businesses coming to our community. We see new developers who are coming to bring in, which is very important, a market rate, affordable housing. We see a community, I think, which has reinvested in our water and sewer. We've invested in even things like odor control on on Hall Street. All of these things, by investing in infrastructure, has set the table, I believe, for expanding that tax base. And you don't have to look very far to see it. You can see it in Pennacook, where we have made investments in the tannery, and you see you see now a housing project. You see the hospital is invested there. So you have both retail and housing. So tax base is truly an important thing, and I'll talk more about it soon.
Mr. Schwecker?
Well, I agree with the mayor that tax base is important. I simply disagree that the projects he's done help the tax base instead of hurting it. The DES project, most of the money from that project will not go to pay for police, fire, and education. It'll go into the downtown TIF district. And the downtown TIF district may never be used to lower taxes. They keep spending it on other things. Like at the same meeting they approved that, they voted to spend some of it on the parking garage. So I think that we need stuff that will actually help the tax base instead of raising the taxes. If there's more than 3 kids out of those 109 apartments, they're going to be costing the school district more than what the school district gets in taxes. So it's going to be a net loss there. But the city doesn't see that. They say, well, this will increase the economy downtown. Well, yes, but this is not Boston. We do not tax sales by the city. So if the downtown merchants sell more, we don't get any of it. We don't get a city rooms and meals tax like many cities do. So if they sell more meals, we don't get any of it. What they may get is it may possibly increase the valuation of those buildings, but I'm not sure that it will. But if it does, we still don't get that money. It goes into the TIF district. I think we need stuff that will actually increase the tax base that pays taxes, not the tax base that goes into special funds. So that would be my feeling, is we've got to quit spending money there, and at the same time, if we rationalize the services we're spending downtown, we could help the neighborhoods. I would appoint a neighborhood streets committee to look into parking, traffic, snow plowing in the neighborhoods, because that's where people live, that's where they care about. The downtown is only 3% of the city's valuation. We need to start paying some attention to the other 97%. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Keach?
Thank you. I won't go further into what the mayor talked about expanding tax base, but that is key. I would disagree strongly with Mr. Schweiker. TIF districts have proven over the last 8 to 10 years to be largely responsible for an increase of valuation on Main Street, which I would only guess at, but it's thousands of dollars. So TIF districts do work. They're very important, they're very effective, and it's money well spent. But to move a little beyond that, one of my other concerns is public safety, particularly the downshifting of costs from the state, the lack of mental health funding, add to a whole host of problems, including crime, homelessness, and as I pointed out in the Monitor earlier this week, a whole bunch of folks that are just dropped on the steps of Concord Hospital, and they're expected to solve these social problems. So I think, I don't know how it would happen, but I think there needs to be some pressure applied on the state level to address that problem and to receive the adequate funding that we need to address these social problems that are largely driven by mental health issues and also related to sort of the opiate crisis as well. They're all interrelated. So tax expansion on the commercial level and public safety are my two sort of tenets that I pay attention to strongly.
Thank you. Steve?
Okay, we'll start with Mr. Keach here. So we already talked about the Main Street redevelopment project. We haven't mentioned the community center, the former Dame School, and then, you know, likely looking forward, we have potentially a rebuild of Runlet Middle School. So, you know, kind of sticking with this kind of tax rate question, what do you say to taxpayers, you know, especially elderly residents and those on a fixed income, that this is the best way to spend money? I mean, what do you say to the people that just want their roads paved?
I'm sympathetic, even as an elderly, not an elderly person that pays taxes. It's expensive. They keep going up every year. You do wonder what's your return on your investment in taxes? You expect your roads to be plowed, your trash to be picked up, although that now costs additional money. So I think the average taxpayer does say, you know, what do I get for my tax dollar? I think with regard to the schools and the city coordination, over the 10 years I've been on the council, there's been really good coordination between the two boards, and I think each board has been sympathetic and responsive to, you know, what's going on next. I recall a portion of time where we were spending some money on the downtown and some other projects, and the school was responsive and was, I would say, restrained in their spending. Things now are at the point where the school's about to spend $70 million or whatever on a middle school, and I think the city's looking at that saying maybe this is the time that we need to be a little more restrained. So there's been good coordination that way. But the short answer is I think the average taxpayer wonders what they get for their tax dollars, and that's not always evident. The last thing I'll say to that point is I just remind taxpayers that about 90% of all the taxes collected go to salary and benefits. So it's a people problem. Well, not a problem, but it's a people expense. And good people are expensive, but I would argue that hiring, retaining good city employees is a priority.
Thank you. Mr. Schreiker, I'm going to change the question around a little bit because I think you touched on this. So I'm going to ask you what you say to those who want a vibrant downtown and see public spending as maybe the best way to attract new business and new residents, and that just, the people who think that just makes smart economic sense. What do you say to those folks?
I guess what I'd say to them is what I've been saying all along, that if the downtown thinks these projects are so good, why are they unwilling to pay for them? If you may remember that Main Street project, the private sector was supposed to pay an equal share as what the city did. And they just pulled out, didn't put up their share, and then as soon as they found they didn't have to pay, they kept adding items and inflating the cost, and they're still going to come back and ask for some more. I think the answer is that if the downtown businesses aren't the ones that are benefiting from this stuff and willing to pay for it, then why the heck should anybody else in the city expect to pay for it? I mean, I certainly understand why taxpayers who get some minor fraction of the services the downtown gets feel unhappy that they're the ones that are paying for it when the downtown people are putting all their money into these TIF funds. Now, sure, there's a huge valuation downtown, but it doesn't go towards schools. It doesn't go to police and fire. It just gets in the TIF districts to keep spending the money on themselves. There's some awfully selfish and greedy people that seem to think the TIF districts are only for themselves and they shouldn't ever pay them off and let the money go back to the police and fire and schools like the rest of the people pay for. So I think if the downtown is not willing to put up its share of the money to help downtown, why should anybody else? Walmart's going to pay more for the stuff around this new building than the new building's going to pay for itself because all that money's going into the TIF district. Thank you. Okay, then Mayor Brule, returning to, what would you say to, the residents on a fixed income and why we shouldn't be putting all our money into neighborhood paving projects and lowering the tax rate?
Well, first of all, we've heard a lot about TIF districts, and I have to say that I take offense to this term Ponzi scheme. Ponzi schemes are illegal, and TIF districts are established by RSA 162K. It is clearly defined by state law that we have the ability to do it. We have 3 TIF districts in the city of Concord, and let's just talk about one of them. We talked about Main Street, but let's talk about all 3 of them. They can be extremely successful because what it does, it still means that the people who build within those TIF districts actually pay taxes. They pay taxes. But the increase in value goes to pay off the bonds for the TIF district. So if you look at the North End Opportunity Corridor, which added $51 million in tax base, and by the way, the three TIF districts, the city of Concord has invested $25 million in infrastructure improvements. So what do we get for that? We have gotten over $90.9 million in new assessed values that we've generated from that. So take the Opportunity Corridor. We have put in originally around $16 million, but we have reallocated from that this last fiscal year, $33.7 million went back into the general fund, and while we still kept $17 million to pay off the debt service. So while you hear tonight, one, I think it's unfair to many who to refer this as a Ponzi scheme, but money is going back into the general fund. Main Street also is creating an incredibly vibrant place. But to answer your question real quickly is if you look at your tax bill, because I think you get an incredible return on investment that you get for your tax dollars. If you take the average home at $250,000 in Concord, your total tax bill is about $6,900. Your municipal tax rate portion, the one that we're talking about, is $2,400. If you live in Merrimack Valley School District, your tax bill on a $250,000 home is over $8,000. But it's still, the municipal tax rate is still $2,400. And what do you get for that $2,400? You get police, fire, plowing, safe streets, and the list goes on. A library, recreation programs. You get high quality services, and I think you get an incredible return on your investment in this city.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. We have a couple of minutes before we go to the audience questions. I wonder if I could follow up on something that I think Mr. Keach was getting close to. Concord is the only municipality in the state in which the school board has complete control over its budget. The city council has no oversight. Do you think that should change? My recollection is this question was a big issue for the community about 25 years ago. Should it be brought up again? And where do you stand on that? Can we start with Mr. Keach?
Sure. Well, my mother says no. But I think it's a question worth exploring. I do think there needs to be some sort of formal coordination between the two boards. There currently isn't. I'm not sure what that would look like exactly. I certainly am not interested in getting involved in the affairs of the school board, because I think what they do is good, effective, and they do a great job at it. But again, the point I made previous was there needs to be some mechanism that makes sure both budgets are coordinated. And historically, at least in the 10 years I've been involved, that's been the case. But that might not always be the case. So I do have some concerns there. So I think it's a discussion worth having. I'd probably put it that way.
Mr. Schweiker?
Well, actually, my father was probably one of the people that was dealing with this 25 years ago. He served a term on the school board, and his idea was that the school board and the city council should review each other's budgets. And I don't know how serious he was, made a good, phrase anyway, but I think Mr. Keach in a way is right, that, having one person have to deal with all the issues that come up in the city and then be an expert on schools to have to, know everything, that's kind of asking too much. Let one group of people deal with the schools, another group of people deal with the city, and somehow, keep each side from spending a lot so that the other side gets squeezed out, which has been happening in some communities. And personally, I think the way to do that is through a tax cap that the voters have to vote at the polls to increase the tax cap if somebody wants to spend more, instead of trying to let the city council judge what the school board needs and the school board judge what the city council needs. Thank you.
Mr. Boulay?
Well, first of all, I think we all know it, but just to remind ourselves, we have two school districts in this community. There's the Merrimack Valley School District and there's the Concord School District. And the idea of having, I actually liked the question that was printed in Sunday's paper. It asked if the mayor could have the authority. I was going to answer sure, yeah, absolutely. But the reality is that we work extremely well together as a school board and as a city council. Having a veto of authority of the school board just doesn't make sense, and I have no idea how it would work in the Merrimack Valley School District because it is of multiple towns. So even if you wanted to, I'm not sure how it would actually happen. But let me just tell you this. The school board and city council, for the past 10 years that I've been mayor, have an excellent working relationship. And here's something that I don't think everybody realizes. But when I said that when I first took office, those first years where it just kept snowing and snowing and snowing and the economy just tanked, we as a city council, we went to the school board and we said, we are in trouble. We need your help. And they stepped up and helped. And I don't know if everybody realizes it, but in 2010, or fiscal year 2010, they actually helped us with a 0% increase on their side so that we could deal with a 2% on our side. Those are the type of relationships we have. We meet quarterly to discuss all of the issues, whether it be insurance, tax rate targets, expanding the tax base. We talk about how we deal with transportation, getting kids to school. There really is a very strong relationship between the city and the school, and to minimize that, I think, is really wrong. But I think we could always do better. I think we need to continue to look to ways to be more efficient. And I think that you have people on both bodies which are more than willing to do that.
Thank you. I think Steve has a question from the audience. And if others have questions, you can give them to John Van Fleet there. We're happy to take them.
Okay, great. This one comes from the audience. We're going to start, just so we kind of chain things up a little bit, with Mr. Schweiker. As mayor of Concord, will you publicly support and encourage the passage of a bill designed to stop all new refugee resettlement into New Hampshire?
Definitely not. Refugees are people who have been through a variety of issues, and many of them have had unspeakable horrors. Refugees are fine people. Society as a whole needs to be kind to them. What we need to do, however, is not dump all the costs of the refugees on a very few communities, where Concord has accepted nearly as many refugees as Manchester, which is a much larger community. I tried to figure it. I think that Concord, typical homeowner, pays $400 in extra taxes due to education and other expenses of refugees. Bow, Hopkinton, and Portsmouth paying none. What we need to do is see that when the refugees come in, they come with the money so the affected communities don't have to go broke, particularly the poorer communities like Concord. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to Mayor Boulay. What responsibility does the city have to the refugee population?
Well, to answer both questions, the idea of stopping refugees coming to the community, I think, is just silly. I think that our refugee population, which I think we should be actually referring to as new Americans, but what's really what they are, they actually enhance our community far beyond, I think, what we ever imagined. When you talk about workforce, I have a process to where I go out and I actually meet with businesses, I meet with business leaders, talk to them about what their needs are, what their relationships with the city, and one of the reoccurring themes I always hear is about workforce. And I have to tell you, these new Americans have fit in not only into our community well, we have welcomed them, they are taking jobs and helping our economy. These are, I think our schools are much better for a refugee population. They have great relationships with our police department, and I think our responsibility as a city is to continue to outreach to folks, to making sure that they have safe housing, to make sure that, that they are functioning members of our community.
Thank you, Mr. Keach.
Yes, I'd echo the mayor's comments. I think as a community, we need to be welcoming to new Americans. They do bring a work ethic that is hardworking. It's important to remember, I think, a little bit of history. And 100 years ago, the Irish weren't welcome in New York City. So I think if you look back at sort of the fear of change, I think that drives some of the questions and some of the suspicions that maybe this isn't such a good idea. But at the end of the day, I think it's a very good idea. I think as a community, we only benefit from it. And so I will do anything I can to support that effort.
Okay, we'd like to welcome Linda Ray Banfield. Welcome to the panel. Did you hear the question that was posed, or would you like me to repeat it?
No, I didn't, and I apologize for being late. This started at 7:30.
Okay.
Would you?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the question. This one came from the audience, and it reads, as mayor of Concord, will you publicly support and encourage the passage of a bill designed to stop all new refugee resettlement into New Hampshire?
Well, we are a nation of immigrants. My ancestors on both sides of the family happened to come in to this country in Massachusetts and Portsmouth before the American Revolution, which we fought in. The American Indians were here. We are usurpers, if I may use the word. The people who come now have a work ethic that we seem to have lost, and I'm sorry for that. I don't know how we get it back. There's a generation that has its hand out instead of wanting to do some work. I am all for immigrants. Manchester, in my opinion, is a microcosm of what this country is all about. It's an immigration center. We would not be here if it weren't for immigration.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe we'd take a minute if everybody's in agreement to give...
I can't hear you. I have an allergy.
Oh, okay. If it's agreeable to everybody else, can we give Ms. Banfield 2 minutes to tell us a little bit about yourself, as the other candidates did, and what you see as the city's top priority. And Dana has flashcards to tell you at the 30-second mark, and then stop.
Okay. I am Linda Ray Banfield. I was born October 14th, 1944 in the Memorial Hospital in North Conway. I graduated from Kennett High. I was at Kennett Eagle in 1962, a UNH Wildcat. I graduated in 1968. My roots are very firm in the Mount Washington Valley and down here. I moved down here July 14th of 1977, I believe. Got my first parking ticket in August when I was interviewing for a job at the Concord Monitor. Welcome to beautiful downtown Concord. I will say this, I've never gotten a ticket I didn't deserve. I worked for the Concord, I worked in Manchester. I worked for the Concord Monitor for 12 years. I worked for a lawyer in Thornton & Thornton in Manchester for a year, temp for Manpower for 5 years. Worked for Helms & Company, which does consulting in the healthcare field. And then I quit that job and did cleaning at the Speedway. I am sorry we don't have the September race was the last one. I love the people who follow NASCAR. It's a great asset to the state. And I'm retired, and We've never had a mayor in the family, and I like Concord very much. It's changed. When I came down here, I said it was a bigger small town that happened to be the state capital. You can meet people. I've taken a lot of people through the State House. I took a man from Texas who was amazed that we could just walk right in. Texas lives by the gun. And I took him up, showed him the Executive Council chambers, and I'm very proud of the state.
Can you just take a second and tell us what you think the top priority is for the city right now?
I can't hear you, honey.
What do you think the top priority is for the city right now? Just take a minute.
I'd like to see patriotism revived. We are such a historic state. Lincoln was here, George Washington, the Marquis de Lafayette. Patriotism seems to have gone by the boards. I have two ancestors who fought in the Civil War. One of them was a corporal with the 14th New Hampshire Volunteers. We had 19 who served in the Civil War. I'm a member of the Auxiliary of the Sons of Union Veterans of the Civil War. I march in Gettysburg on Remembrance Day, which is the weekend before Thanksgiving. This will be my third year marching. I have ancestors who fought in the American Revolution. I don't think we appreciate the history, and patriotism needs to be revived.
All right, thank you. Let me switch gears a little bit here and ask about a question that's going to be up for public referendum in the election, and that's Keno. We want to ask each candidate where they stand on Keno in Concord. My understanding is as many as 63 pouring institutions are eligible to have Keno, depending on the outcome of the referendum. Mayor Boulay, can you start?
Sure. Well, I'll say this. Truthfully, it's up to the citizens of Concord, and whatever you choose is fine by me. But I will say this. I was very pleased that the legislature chose to move forward with all-day kindergarten. I don't think that the funding of full-day kindergarten for the $1,100 that's guaranteed per child is enough, but it's a start. And I think that, the state makes all kinds of decisions in terms of taxation that we could probably go on for hours about. But at the end of the day, I was pleased that the state stepped up and passed the full-day kindergarten, and I will unabashedly say I will welcome the $1,100 per child.
Thank you. Mr. Swiker?
My feeling is that Keno is a shining example of what should happen with more things in the city, and that is it should be put to a public vote. I think that right now the information is such that Keno will not notably affect the expenses of the city and will not notably affect city services, so it's not something that the city council needs to deal with. It's something that is, each individual has to decide for themselves whether it's a good or bad thing for the city.
Where do you stand?
I personally don't care one way or another, but my feeling is, even if I did, I would vote to do exactly what the council has done, namely put it to the voters to make the final decision. I think that's great, and I think we should do that with more things. Thank you.
Mr. Keach?
Thank you. I thought it was sort of brilliant the way the legislature tied it to local control and leaving it up to each community to decide whether it's a good fit for that community or not. I'm personally not opposed to Keno. I think it's a great mechanism of funding for kindergarten. I think all-day kindergarten is a really important thing. I'd like to see that happen. And I will also just sort of editorialize a little bit that, the idea that this will create a new class of addicted gamblers, I don't buy. I think people who are inclined to gamble are going to gamble either legally or illegally, so why not get a piece of that action?
Ms. Banfield?
Well, I am all for kindergarten, and if gambling is the only way we can do it, then fine. I have no children. I've been paying taxes in Conway since '68. 60% of my tax money goes for education. 75% of it, I've owned a house in Concord since, well, it's 27 years ago, October 14th. I believe 75% of my money goes for education. So I benefit indirectly. We need to get these kids off to a damn good start. It's the future of our country, and the state and the city. And you cannot stop people from gambling. It's like prohibition. It didn't work during the 20s.
All right, thank you. Steve?
Okay, we'll keep it with Ms. Banfield. There's been an issue that's been a topic for years now. The winter homeless shelter is currently being built. Likely won't be ready by mid-December. What should the city's plan be for the cold weather shelter? What's going to happen this winter?
If you were addressing me, I can't hear you. My friends in the Barley House say I need an ear trumpet. It's an allergy. My ears are plugged up.
Would you like to switch seats with me?
Would it be easier if you switch seats?
It might
Stay a
be.
little closer? I'll just switch one.
Well, she moves down everyone. Everything okay? Closer yet?
We all moved down.
Okay.
You want to go right to the end?
Yes. Someone said I always cause a disruption. Thank you very much.
This is the way we do it in Concord. We find solutions.
Yes, we do.
Oh, sorry, I stole your microphone.
You're going to be right next to the mayor's club?
Okay.
And not to them because we have trouble hearing you. So thank you.
Thank you for that, man.
Okay, thank you.
Maybe everybody hold the microphone up a little bit closer.
Okay, so the question was about the winter homeless shelter. There's currently a winter homeless shelter being built, but it likely won't be ready until mid-December, or actually won't be ready by mid-December, looking that way. What's the city's plan going to be this year for a cold weather shelter?
I still can't hear you. You're not speaking into the microphone or something.
Okay. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. So winter homeless shelter is currently being built, likely won't be ready by mid-December. What should the city's plan be this year for a cold weather shelter?
Well, I'll go last now that I can hear it. Mayor Boulay. I bow to you, the incumbent.
Very, very clever.
Wow, okay. So,
Can you pull the mic up? Thanks.
sure. So, as many of you know, there's a fundamental question: is should the city of Concord actually be running a homeless shelter? And I've always thought that it's not appropriate. The state law requires the city, all municipalities, to actually be of last resort. So if somebody is in need and somebody presents themselves to our Human Services Department, it is our responsibility to the community to care for that individual, to find housing if possible. But it is very difficult, and it's also very costly at times when you have particularly a family who presents themselves. And we have had families over the years, as well as individuals who present themselves. So as a city, this one's going to take a little longer. I hope you don't mind. So as a city, we have stepped up over the years. I've tried to organize a family shelter and working with United Way, the Friends program, the Concord Coalition on Homelessness, and the Concord Hospital. The list goes on of all the volunteers that participated. But this year, the rabbit can't keep coming out of the hat. And we were fortunate to have, all right, I'll summarize this. What we're going to do is we are going to have a temporary solution between now, probably around December 15th, to the time that it opens, the coalition opens their shelter, and that will probably be where it was in the past 2 years, and then there'll be a transition over to the the shelter done by the coalition. It's the city's responsibility. I think that we've set aside around $30,000 in the budget. The budget for the overall taking care of the homeless shelter is around $50,000 a year. I've gone out and tried to raise that money otherwise. I do not believe, like I've heard from some others, that there should be means testing of folks who present themselves in a homeless shelter. I don't think anybody wants to be there, and we don't need to continue to kick somebody when they're down. But I do believe there will be a temporary solution, and there will be a permanent solution for those winter months.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Schweiker.
Well, Mr. Leone, if you've been reading your paper, I've written some letters claiming that this homeless solution that they were working on was going to be a problem, and I think I've been proven correct. Once again, I respectfully disagree with the mayor. If you want food stamps, you can't just walk in and say, I want food stamps, and have them given to you. That's means tested. If you say, I want fuel assistance, they don't just give you fuel assistance. It's means tested. I don't see why shelter shouldn't be the same way. And one of the key reasons for this is, my feeling is a lot of the people that go to the shelter are not destitute. They have income, but they would rather spend it on drugs or liquor. And so by offering a free shelter to everybody, we're attracting people that are hooked on substances that we realistically don't need in this city. So I think if we means tested it, it wouldn't be as likely to overflow. And I think that those that we had to pay money for, we should have some sort of work fare. There's plenty of snow to be shoveled around Concord in the winter. And once again, I think if we limited this to people that really were in need and wanted to help, that would be great. Thank you.
Mr. Keach?
Thank you. I spent about 5 years as a police officer in Portland, Maine, dealt with homeless and issues there. I've spent the past 10 years on the board of directors at the Friendly Kitchen. Obviously, a lot of homeless use that service. There is nobody that chooses to be homeless. Right? They might make poor choices, but it goes back to what I said originally about the lack of mental health services in this community. Those poor decisions or unfortunate decisions, however you want to categorize them, are the result of the lack of other resources. So I'm not sure about a short-term solution to a cold weather shelter, but I can tell you a long-term solution involves getting those folks the services they need, and the problem will get a whole bunch better.
Okay, we're back to you, Ms. Banfield.
Well, I have given money to people on the street. I always feel that it's there, but for the grace of God, go I. Some people do choose to camp out in the winter, and that's their choice. I just think Concord can do a little bit better. I gave, as an example, there was a man from, who said he wanted money, $20, he wanted to take a bus back to South Carolina. And I gave him $20. Well, it turns out he's probably on drugs, he's on welfare, and he got yelled at. He was looking in a car to try, I yelled at him. I won't do that again. But there are people who need it. And I think, I do not consider myself a great Christian, but it's like there, but for the grace of God, go I. And what you give out, you get back.
Okay, thank you.
I think we have time for one more question before we have the candidates give their closing statements. So we wanted to give each of you a minute to address this issue. There's a lot of discussion in the news and in society today about civil discourse or uncivil discourse, whether it's in politics or at the baseball field or on Main Street. Could you take a minute to give us your thoughts on how can we address that? What can we do to promote more civil discourse? Or do you think it's an issue? Mr. Keach?
Thank you. I certainly think it's an issue. I think, in my opinion, it sort of comes from the top down. I think our current president has given some license to deal with issues in a way that isn't necessarily constructive. And that's not to say that we shouldn't disagree with other folks' positions, but I think there's a way to disagree and a way to constructively disagree and a way to move forward and have a discussion about our disagreements and not villainize people and go in that direction. So without trying to get too political, I just think from the top down, there's a certain tone has been set, and it's unfortunate. And certainly on my time on the council, whether there have been disagreements or not, we have all respected each other and talked about the issues and not gone after people or colleagues in a personal way. And I think that's important for any legislative body. So that would be my position.
All right, thank you. Mr. Schweiker?
Well, I think that the way to have more civil discourse is to have more discourse at all. The city council used to have neighborhood meetings around the city where the various people would go out and the residents could either ask the city council questions or express their opinions, and that's been discontinued. For this election, I ask that all candidates be given equal access to ask financial questions to the city to develop their platform, and that was denied. I don't know whether it was the city manager or who that denied it, because that's one of the questions they wouldn't answer. I think that we need to let the city council actually talk to people and find out what they think, instead of pretending that they're know-it-alls and will do what they please because they know better than the residents. And if you want to know the questions that weren't answered, you can find them on my blog.
All right, thank you. Mr. Boulay?
Well, I really appreciate this question because one of the things that I've talked about that I think we need to continue to do better in the city is communicate with our residents. And what's fascinating is so many people now expect to communicate by these little gadgets and their iPads and all the other forms of technology. But we've, as a city, have tried to meet people. So now you can register your children for recreation activities online. You can actually go online and you can get a book from the library. I mean, more and more you're expected to do this. But as we go deeper into technology, I'm finding, and I'll just tell you one quick story, 11:30 at night, I'm sitting with my son, we're watching the basketball game, and I get an email where somebody called me every name you could imagine. Well, next morning, what did I do? I went to their door. I knocked on their door. I said, hey, you really have some issues with the city. Could we talk about these things? And sure enough, when the gentleman faced me, looked me in the eye, it was a whole different response. And I think that we are very fortunate in Concord because we are not partisan elections, that we are a close-knit community, that we do take the time to walk away from our technology now and then, that we walk up and down the street, we're willing to talk to each other. But I think we're better than most places, but I think we need to always continue to guard against hiding behind technology and having those communications.
Thank you. Ms. Banfield?
One of the greatest strengths of this country is the fact that we can have different opinions, agree to disagree, and still be friends. I grew up with Good Night Chet, Good Night David, Huntley Brinkley Report. They used to duke it out. They were enemies on the floor of the house, and then they go socialize. We've lost something, and it's true. It's these computers. People would say things on a computer that they don't have the guts to tell you when they're looking you in the eye, and it's wrong. And I think they've done studies with all these kids who use their computers, and they take them away from them, and they have withdrawal symptoms like drug or an alcohol. We need to be able to look people in the eye and just sit down and talk. We're never all going to agree. And that's, I think, one of our greatest strengths, that we can have differing opinions and still get along and socialize and be friends.
Thank you. Steve?
Great. We'll move on to the closing statements. Each candidate will have 1 minute. So Ms. Banfield, we'll start with you. So, Ms. Banfield, we'll start with you. Closing statement.
Still cannot
Closing statement. You have 1 minute to make a closing statement.
I would like to see please and thank you come back. I'd like to see history taught. We have spelling bees, and this is not my original idea. Somebody said, how about a science bee or a history bee or a civics bee, or just to get kids involved and be aware of the great heritage we have in this city, in this country. I go in the Barley House a lot. There's a sign that said the road to the White House starts in the Barley House. Well, it does. And the Concord Monitor gets a lot of great reporters who go on to the Washington Post and win Pulitzer Prizes, but they come here because they can talk to a presidential candidate and meet them face to face and shake hands with them. They don't happen in other states. We have something very special in Concord and in this city, in the city and in this country.
Thank you. Mayor.
Sure. Well, 1 minute. Here we go. Hold on. So thank you very much again for providing us the opportunity to participate this evening. Over the past 10 years, the City of Concord has made great progress, in my opinion, and I believe it's not time to turn the clock back. The city that stays the same falls behind, and I'm unwilling to accept the status quo. I think you have all known me. I am a proven entity. My record, I think, speaks for itself, whether it be the multi-award winning Main Street Complete Street Project, Sewell's Falls Bridge reconstruction, the multi-generational Center on the Heights, the investments we've made in Pennacook, Loudon Road, the enhanced street paving program we've done. I'm very proud of the fact that we've continued to invest in open space. I mean, think about it. Where else can you live where you have 81 miles of trails? We are continuing to invest in our economic development area. We invest in our public safety. We exit 16. We have been able to maintain an incredible bond rating, and the list goes on and on of accomplishments. So every mayor, in my opinion, has his or her brand. Over the past 10 years, I've tried to make it my goal to make city government open, welcoming, and fair to all citizens. I truly believe, and I've said it often, Tom, that we are a city on the move, and I want you to know that you all have my commitment that each and every day I will do the best I can to make Concord the most vibrant and livable city for all citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Schweiker.
The mayor has told me that Ponzi schemes are illegal, and yes, I know that. And I actually think that perhaps if it was a broker that had presented that DES project is a good investment, that probably the Bunko Squad would have been after him. Because here we have a project that is going to raise taxes, because taxpayers have got to pay for the schools and so forth for the people who live there, when all that money goes into this special pot of downtown TIF district that may never come back. The one TIF district was just extended for 19 years. I won't live long enough to see that district end. And it was supposed to be paid off, the bonds, but no, the money just goes for more goodies. And I think that we need to invest in the other 97% of the city that's not on Main Street. That's what my Neighborhood Streets Committee is going to do. We're going to look at every street in the city, not to the same detail as Main Street. We can't afford it, but at least it's going to get looked at. And so here's my motto: Concord is more than Main Street. Thank you.
Mr. Keach.
Thank you. I'd ask for your vote. I've been on the council for 10 years. I think I've been a good listener, executed what I think has been the right thing to do. I'm continually encouraged about where Concord's headed. I have 3 younger kids between 18 and 25, and I'm continually encouraged about their optimism, their investment and commitment to Concord. I think it's a great thing, and I also, again, don't share the opinion that the investment in Main Street has been a mistake at all. It's the way to go. It's going to broaden the commercial tax base, and in the end, that's a good thing for the residential homeowner who's burdened with taxes. So I'm optimistic about Concord. I think this past council has done a good job. We've worked very collaboratively, and I look to the future because I think just great things are coming for Concord.
Great, thank you. So we have, I just want to point out, we have 2 at-large candidates who couldn't make it tonight. We have George Jack and Amanda Grady Sexton. Amanda did send me a note she would like me to read. This is from her. I'm deeply sorry that I was unable to join you tonight. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime by phone or email if you have a question about my stance on an issue. I always welcome and appreciate questions and feedback. So I want to thank all the candidates for your time. We'll be back in a few minutes. We've got to do a set change. We're going to be back with the school board candidates. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.